Many of us will end up in a hospital at some point of our lives, trusting our doctors and nurses to provide us with the care that we need to get healthy. But what if that weren't the case? What if you were unfortunate enough to encounter someone who abused their position to hurt you? Today, we're going to talk about Beverly Allitt, the nightmare nurse, whose victims were under her care during her time in a children's ward in England. That's right, not patients, victims. Hello, I'm your host Sam, and welcome back to Killer Bites. In 1991, nurse Beverly Allitt murdered 4 children and attacked 9 others in her care. Before she became the serial killer nightmare nurse, Beverly Allitt was just another small-town girl from Lincolnshire County, England. Allitt was born on October 4th, 1968. By all accounts, her family was normal, but as she approached adolescence, young Beverly began to struggle. At around 10 years old, she started wearing a bandage to school to get sympathy. She noticed that she got attention for this and developed a habit of faking injuries. She even went as far as making a DIY plaster cast. When people started to get used to the fake cast, she started to harm herself to get more visible injuries. According to the prevailing theory, what eventually developed into Munchausen by proxy started as Munchausen syndrome, a mental illness where someone willfully makes themselves ill for sympathy or attention. Someone with this condition is aware that they are not sick, but are driven to harm themselves or exaggerate illness in order to get what they want. She was lonely during her teenage years and spent most of her time moving from doctor to doctor. As soon as one suspected that she might be faking it, she would look for a new one. Her commitment to this went so far that she was able to have a perfectly healthy appendix removed and then picked at the sutures to complicate her recovery. What kind of normal parents see their child going through this and then don't get her help? Due to her barely attending school because of her undiagnosed Munchausen syndrome, her grades suffered. Just when it seemed that she had no future after graduating at 17, a family friend who was a nurse helped enroll her in a vocational nursing school. It was there that her predisposition for harm and morbid interest in medicine began to fester. While in nursing school, she worked at a local pub where she lied so much to the regulars that they nicknamed her the Fable. She met Stephen Briggs at the pub when she was 19, and they had a very brief marriage. Stephen later revealed that they divorced because Beverly was physically and verbally abusive. She was also a compulsive liar. The lie that broke their marriage was when she told him that she had been raped and she was pregnant with the rapist's baby. When Stephen realized this wasn't true, he was shocked. On top of the abuse that he had suffered, lying to this extent crossed the line. After their breakup, her Munchausen syndrome clearly took a turn. Her last year in school, she reportedly took 160 sick days. When she moved into the nurses' dormitories that year, strange things started to happen, and one of the worst things was that someone smeared feces all over the communal kitchen's oven. She also did bizarre things using medical equipment. One time she injected a syringe full of water directly into her breast, making it abnormally large. The combination of strange behavior like this and missing nearly half of her training left her as the only trainee not offered a permanent position. They did want to offer her something, so they gave her a 6-month temporary contract at the children's ward at Grantham Hospital, also known as Ward 4. The fact they put their least competent nurse in charge of children blows my mind. One of the nurses who already worked there said it was unusual that they hired a nurse with 0 experience with children and that they would usually need someone with at least a year of additional training. Then she admitted that because they were so short-staffed, they were grateful for the extra hand. Beverly Allitt's first shift on Ward 4 was February 18th, 1991. She was 22 years old. It was a small hospital that staff described as a nice place to work, and they saw their other employees as family. Her superiors recognized her enthusiasm, especially because she arrived during a surge of winter illnesses that had them unusually busy. Liam James Taylor, a 7-week-old baby with pneumonia, was sent to Ward 4 where he ended up under Nurse Beverly's care. She comforted the exhausted, distraught parents, and then she told them that their tiny baby was safe and that they could go home and get some rest while he stayed in the hospital. The next day, they returned to the hospital only to find that Liam was worse. He had suffered a respiratory attack during the night. Nurse Beverly volunteered to stay the additional night to look after him, even though she wasn't scheduled and that she wouldn't be paid for it. In the next 24 hours, he had 3 more respiratory attacks. He was resuscitated each time, but on the 3rd attack, the machines monitoring his vitals didn't sound the alarm. Nurse Beverly happened to rush in and found him after he had gone into cardiac arrest for the 3rd time. He was pale, his lips were blue, and he was covered in red splotches. He was only 7 weeks old and suffered severe brain damage. His parents were forced to make the unthinkable decision to take him off of life support. Baby Liam's death was a devastating blow to his parents and the hospital, but this was only the first of a series of tragic events that followed. 2 weeks later, on March 5th, 1991, Timothy Hardwick, an 11-year-old with cerebral palsy and epilepsy, had a seizure at school and was admitted to the Ward 4 to be monitored. After only a couple hours at the hospital, he went into sudden cardiac arrest, just like Liam Taylor before. He stopped breathing, and the team of doctors weren't able to bring him back. At 6:15 that evening, Timothy Hardwick was pronounced dead. This shocking death came out of nowhere. The doctors did an autopsy to see if they could find a cause, but the results were inconclusive, so they decided that the cardiac arrest was related to his epilepsy. A week before Timothy Hardwick's tragic death, a 15-month-old baby named Kaylee Desmond had been admitted with a chest infection. She had made a recovery and Nurse Beverly was assigned to help collect her things. Out of nowhere, the infant went into cardiac arrest 2 times in under an hour. Because she had 2 attacks in a row, the doctors sent her to the nearby Nottingham Hospital, where there were more robust treatment options. The doctors at Nottingham thoroughly looked into how an otherwise healthy baby recovering from a chest infection could go into cardiac arrest. After examining Kaylee Desmond, they found nothing except a puncture mark and an air bubble in her armpit, which they chalked up to an accidental infection from the hospital. Kaylee survived, but she was never the same. She has severe PTSD and a disability from the lack of oxygen to her brain during the 2 cardiac arrests. Another 2 weeks later, a 5-month-old baby named Paul Crampton was being monitored in Ward 4 after recovering from a chest infection. What was supposed to be a day or 2 visit to make sure this baby had a full recovery turned into an absolute nightmare. Within a few hours of him being admitted, Paul Crampton had gone into sudden cardiac arrest. The doctors rushed to him and they were able to save him. While they are running diagnostics to try and figure out what happened, he went into a second cardiac arrest. They resuscitated him again, but the second time he was left in a severely weakened state. They tried giving him glucose and he was able to recover. The speedy recovery struck the doctors as odd, so they kept him for a few more days to monitor him. A few days later, just as baby Paul was about to go home, he went into a 3rd cardiac arrest. This time, they decided to transport him to the better equipped Nottingham Hospital. Who jumped at the chance to heroically stay by his side with his mother in the ambulance? None other than Nurse Beverly Allitt. When the results came back from the lab, they were shocked to find that Paul Crampton's blood insulin level was at 500. The normal amount for a baby his age is between 10 and 15. Paul Crampton made a full recovery and never suffered a cardiac arrest or insulin-related problems for the rest of his life. The day Paul Crampton went home with his family, 5-year-old Bradley Gibson was admitted to Grantham Hospital to be treated for a chest infection. Despite being sick, he had a charming personality that endeared him to the nurses. They had him on an IV for antibiotics, and that night Bradley complained that the IV was hurting him. Nurse Beverly went to his room to help. When she was there, he slumped over, stopped breathing, and his heart stopped. The team hurried in to resuscitate him, and they had to use an adult dosage of shocks for 30 minutes to save his life. They ran tests and found the same abnormally high insulin levels in his blood as Paul Crampton, but because the tests were done at 2 different hospitals, no one was communicating this pattern that was developing. Meanwhile, that evening, Bradley Gibson went into cardiac arrest for a second time. Nurse Beverly rushed to his side and the team resuscitated him again. This second event got him transferred to Nottingham for more expert care, and just like the others who made it there, he survived but suffers to this day. He couldn't use his legs until after years of physical therapy. He couldn't control his bladder for a number of years afterwards, and he had recurring nightmares. All of these strange cases happened in only the first month that Beverly Allitt was placed in Ward 4. This pattern baffled everyone, but no one had any explanation for what was happening. On March 22nd, just over 2 weeks after Timothy Hardwick's death, Yik Hung Chan, a 2-year-old also known as Henry, was taken to the hospital after he fell and cracked his head. Nurse Beverly attended to his fractured skull, and within hours of arriving at Ward 4, he suddenly stopped breathing. Just like the other cases, the staff rushed to him and he was sent to Nottingham Hospital. He made a recovery and never had another cardiac arrest. Just like Kaylee, Paul, and Bradley, he was better as soon as he was taken away from Ward 4 and the overly attentive nurse who was with them all just before they stopped breathing. Unfortunately, Nottingham Hospital decided this random cardiac arrest was due to his skull fracture. At this point, it literally blows my mind that the hospitals are not picking up on a pattern. But sadly, The next victim never made it to the larger hospital. On April 1st, 1991, Becky and Katie Phillips were prematurely born twins, only 9 weeks old, that ended up in Ward 4. Becky was admitted first because of severe stomach issues, and a small baby that's pretty scary, so she was kept under close watch. In just a couple of days, as soon as she was beginning to recover, Nurse Beverly found her not breathing and she was resuscitated. She bounced back quickly from the cardiac arrest and was sent home. Once she was home, however, she went into convulsions, and the distraught parents called a doctor to come and examine the newborn. He said her constant crying was colic and told the parents to soothe her as best they could and take her to the hospital the following morning. They went to bed, and the next day when they came to the crib, their 9-week-old baby had died. They were devastated and terrified that Becky's twin Katie might suffer the same fate, so they brought her to the hospital to be safe. When they arrived at the children's ward, they were greeted by the familiar and comforting face of Nurse Beverly Allitt, who assured them she would take care of her. Lo and behold, after only a few hours in the hospital, Katie stopped breathing. Like previous cases, she was treated by doctors, but after going into cardiac arrest twice, they transferred her to Nottingham Hospital. Upon arrival, the doctors examined the baby and found that she had 5 broken ribs. No one knew how this happened, but the doctors connected her lungs collapsing to the broken ribs. The doctors seemed satisfied with this conclusion and somehow still didn't see a pattern of harm being done to the children transferred from Grantham's Ward 4. Katie Phillips survived, but was left with cerebral palsy due to the lack of oxygen from her attacks. Despite the diagnosis of a lifelong disability, the grief-stricken parents were so grateful their other daughter lived that they asked Nurse Beverly Allitt to be Katie's godmother. Allitt was that convincing as the caring nurse she pretended to be. Beverly Allitt went above and beyond, volunteering her time to care for these patients so no one suspected that she was harming them. A small boy named Patrick Elstone was the last victim in a string of near-identical attacks. He stopped breathing, turned blue, and it was Nurse Beverly who happened to be there despite the monitors he was connected to not alerting the rest of the staff. On April 22nd, 15-month-old Claire Peck was brought to Ward 4 after an asthma attack. Claire had suffered from asthma since her birth, and the staff knew her very well, but this was the first time that she had been in while Nurse Beverly was on staff. She was put on a ventilator and was watched over by none other than Nurse Beverly while Claire's parents went to an office to talk to the doctors. And after only a short time, the baby had 2 cardiac attacks. The first she recovered from, but the second one left her too weak to survive. Her heart stopped, and she was pronounced dead. Her grieving parents were at the bedside as she passed away. The staff who knew Claire were devastated and remembered this as the saddest day they had witnessed at Grantham Hospital. Her death was ruled by the coroner as natural causes, but a pediatric consultant named Dr. Porter was concerned by the number of infant deaths due to cardiac arrest in the hospital over the past couple months. He filed a formal inquiry thinking that this was a case of the hospital's operations, but never expecting the terrible truth behind these deaths. Dr. Porter came up with a list of the 13 children from the past 2 months prior that suffered similar fates. They had all stopped breathing, turned blue, and followed a matching but random pattern. He brought this to the police and told them that he had no proof, but that he knew something wasn't right. The police looked at the report and deemed it a staff issue, not a criminal case. They did, however, open a formal inquiry. After visiting the hospital, Superintendent Stuart Clifton saw that something suspicious was going on, despite everyone else thinking that there was nothing. He knew that there was foul play. Stuart Clifton thought that if there was even a chance that someone was harming children, this was worth looking into. The police became a constant presence at the hospital in order to investigate the case. They started by interviewing everyone that worked at Ward 4. The nurses went first, and Beverly Allitt was one of the earliest interviews. The police remembered her as warm, enthusiastic, and passionate about her job. At this point in her life, she has perfected the art of creating the illusion of the caring nurse. Her interview went off without a hitch. Meanwhile, another detective, Neil Jones, was able to locate a fridge at Grantham Hospital where blood samples were being stored. This allowed him to go through all the blood samples. He managed to recover 9 test tubes out of the 13 children that were attacked. Every one of the blood tests showed extremely high insulin levels. Each child that had suffered a sudden cardiac arrest or stopped breathing had abnormally high levels of injectable in their system. The investigators feared that someone in the hospital could have been intentionally overdosing these children with insulin. The police went to the hospital to find out where the insulin was stored. Turned out, the key that normally locked the fridge containing insulin and other went missing a couple months prior. The last person who was known to have the keys was, any guesses? Nurse Beverly Allitt. The police compiled all the tests and case files. They discovered that all shared one thing. Nurse Beverly Allitt had been working on the days of the assaults. Remember, she had only been working there for 2 days before the first attack. This placed her squarely as the prime suspect in the case, and the authorities acted quickly to prevent any further harm. They started to look into Beverly Allitt's personal life, and they quickly saw that she had Munchausen syndrome. Once harming herself was no longer an option, she developed Munchausen by proxy. By proxy means instead of harming yourself for sympathy or attention, you harm another. This is particularly troubling because the caretakers, while being the cause of the harm, appear externally caring and loving. On May 1st, 1991, at 7 a.m., the police arrived at Beverly Allitt's house to arrest her. They didn't have a lot of evidence, so they had to be careful. They were officially arresting her for stealing the key to the fridge where the insulin was stored and the attempted murder of Paul Crampton. They took her to the police station for an interview, and while Stewart Clifton expected the young woman to give a full confession, her demeanor was strangely calm and confident, and she committed fully to her caring nurse role. She was clear-headed. It was almost as if she expected this and planned for it. While she was being held, officers went to her house and they found some damning evidence. The missing parts of the nursing log, specifically Paul Crampton's files, were there along with a syringe. The police brought a psychiatrist to speak with Beverly Allitt and confirm the mental illness they suspected she had. The psychiatrist agreed with their suspicions and thought that her Munchausen syndrome started in elementary school. She was converted to Munchausen by proxy when she realized that she couldn't continue to work and be ill. When she discovered that she could be praised for saving a sick child by their parents, things clicked into place. She harmed these children so that she could save the day. The psychiatrist also said she had a personality disorder that allowed her to do this for so long without realizing the consequences. It was clear to the police that she wouldn't confess to this. After holding her for 72 hours, the police didn't have enough evidence to hold her, so they had no other choice than to release a suspected child murderer. While Stewart Clifton and the police investigated other cases to find more evidence, Beverly went to live with a close friend, Tracy Jobson, along with her 14-year-old brother Jonathan and her mother Eileen. As soon as Beverly Allitt left the hospital, the mysterious attack stopped. When she showed up at the Jobsons, strange things started happening. Someone put bleach in Jonathan's bed and their family dog was poisoned with pills. After staying with them a few days, Tracy Jobson's brother Jonathan got incredibly sick while they were out shopping. He had a hypoglycemic attack. Jonathan told Eileen that Allitt gave him a juice that tasted funny. When Eileen figured out that she had given her son insulin poisoning, she called the police. By November 1991, the police had enough evidence to charge Beverly Allitt with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of grievous bodily harm. When she was brought in for an interview this time, she had clearly been advised by a lawyer and gave a deadpan no reply when asked anything. Over the next 15 months, Beverly Allitt was held at Wakefield Prison while she awaited her trial until February 15, 1993. She pleaded not guilty and refused to take the stand. In fact, citing illness, Beverly only attended less than half of the trial. During the trial, prosecutors brought troubling new information to light. It turned out that not only was she poisoning these small children, she was abusing them. Moments after inflicting terrible suffering, she would put on a kind nurse persona and ingratiate herself to her victims' parents. The prosecution also found that every time the monitors had been malfunctioning, as you might suspect, it was because Beverly Allitt had been turning them off. In addition, when the children were being resuscitated with oxygen, she would pinch the oxygen tubes to prevent them from getting what they needed to recover. The prosecution's case was airtight. The jury convicted her of all 13 counts and she was given 13 life sentences. The judge called her an evil woman and not once has she expressed any remorse for what she did. She was sentenced and sent to Holloway Prison to serve out her time. During the trial, she didn't meet the criteria that she was mentally ill. After being at Holloway only a week, she refused to eat or drink and then she was moved to Crampton Secure Hospital. Now 55 years old, her minimum sentence tariff of 30 years expired in 2021, and if she is deemed able to transfer to a prison, she will be able to apply for parole. One of the victims, Kaylee Asher, who is now 31, fears that Beverly Allitt will come back to get her if she's ever released. The children's wing at Grantham Hospital, also known as Ward 4, was shut down after the trial, but the trauma of her actions remains. Since she is never given an explanation, we will forever be left wondering why she committed these heinous acts. Let us know in the comments what you think. Was she mentally ill, or was she a cold-blooded killer? Thank you for watching this episode of Killer Bites. I'm Sam, and we'll see you next time.